Threadology finishing video. Thank you so much for donating to Make-A-Wish. If you haven't donated yet, there's still time. There's a link in the description. Moda and Fat Quarter Shop will both be donating $10,000 to Make-A-Wish, and we're hoping to raise $40,000 for 2019. So on the finishing, I'm gonna give you some tips on cutting length of fabric. So when we did this, we have all of these borders on the sides and the tops length of fabric. And the reason that we did that is because I don't want to show a crease in this side. This is a cross weave and it's got grain to it, and I feel like if we did it with the fabric and sewed it together, first of all, it would take more time, and second of all, I think you would see the crease. So I'm gonna give you a lot of tips on how you can cut length of fabric. So the very most important thing to do is take your fabric and iron it and get it nice, get all the creases out. And then you want to fold them together. So this is a 2-yard cut, so I'm going to fold it in half. And when you fold it in half, you want these folds right here to be as even as possible. So I've got that done. Now I'm going to fold it one more time. So now I've got about 18 inches 4 times. But the most important thing is this top is all even. So when you have it even and you put your ruler, the very top should be even, and when you look at this down here, it should be even, and it is. So that is the very most important thing, is getting this ironed perfectly, getting the creases out, folding it where your fold is straight, so that if you look at a ruler, this is exactly a 90-degree angle, and this is an exactly 90-degree angle. So what I'm going to do from there is, if you look at your diagram in the free pattern, you've got to cut 7 strips total that are 4.5 inches wide. And I've got this doubled up. So I really only have to cut 4. And that'll give me 1 extra, and I'm okay with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the right end. It doesn't matter which side you start on, but I've made sure that everything is lined up. If you don't make sure it's lined up, when you unfold your fabric, it will kind of have a curve to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my Creative Grids ruler on one side. I'm going to line up to make sure this line is exactly even with the top and the bottom, and it is, because I can follow my lines, and I'm going to trim. Now you want a sharp blade because you're going through a lot of layers. And when I'm going through a lot of layers, I will put more weight on my ruler. And this fabric, it leaves a little bit of residue. It's the nature of the fabric, so I kind of just keep that clean as I'm going. And then you're going to move your fabric as gently as you can so that it does not move. So when I moved it, I moved all of it. So now we're going to cut 4 4.5 inch strips. And when you look at your diagram, it's going to show you the full 44. But since I folded it in half, I'm now at 21, so I only have to do 4 strips. And this is just the way that I cut my length of fabric strips. Most of the quilts that I do, probably not most, probably all, I always use length of fabric on the border. I never like a crease to show in my border, and this actually saves time, and I like the sturdy, how a length of fabric, if you pull on it, there's no give in it. Whereas if you had a width of fabric, there's a little bit of give. So I feel like the length of fabric really adds stability to your quilt. So I'm going to cut the 4. You're going to have 1 extra, and that's okay. It's okay to have extra. So I will keep this in my stash of fabric to use in something else because it's a big enough piece. And then what we've got to do, I'm going to kind of set these aside without moving them too much. From one of the strips, you need 4 4.5 inch squares. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut those. And since this is all doubled up, I only have to cut once. So here's my 4.5-inch squares. Now this, I'll save this, put this in my little bucket of things to use in the future. So you've got extra fabric left over. Now we have all of our length of fabric strips cut. And when we're adding it, we're gonna be adding this one first. And this is your side inner border, which is fabric A. And that should be 4.5 by 48.5. So what I'm gonna do is unfold this. I'm gonna put a pin where this crease is. This is gonna be the center of my strip, and it'll make sense in a second. This is how I do all of my borders always. Now this should be 48.5 divided by 2 is 24.25. A lot of times at home I can't do that math, so I'll get my calculator out. And this is the only time I will use my mat for a measurement. So I'm gonna put a pin in each little section, and I never cut my borders at this point, never. I always add them to my quilt and then trim them after. So when you pull this out, I'll just pull one of them to show you. We have measured, this should be 48.5 inches across, and I've got the center marked. So what I would do, we don't have the whole quilt put together, so I'm gonna walk you through what you would do. If you had this right here, this is your side, you would take this and this, fold it in half, and find your center and put a little mark. Then you would take your border, first pin the center, and then both edges, and the edges would be the end of your border. Pin the center, the two outer pieces, and then pin within. Then stitch it on, press it, and then cut your border. And so that is how I work with length of fabric strips. So after you've cut your borders, length of fabric, you want to go ahead and lay out all your blocks. This is the format we have in the pattern, and we've just divided them into sections for you. Now, of course, you can play around and move stuff around however you want. This is when it's great to have a design board, and if you don't have a design board, you can always just lay this out on your floor, which is what I do. So what you're going to do is just lay it out, get it exactly how you want it, and then you're going to put this together in sections. Just put it into sections, and you will be stitching with a 1/4-inch seam and pressing open. And so when I'm at home doing this, I would do these, put it back on the design board. Do these, put it back on the design board. So as I'm sewing, I would just do one section at a time, just to keep it together. And then I would sew down one column, another column, and then your last column. But you can really feel free, you know, you can do this section, you can do it however you want, and then you're just gonna follow your pattern to put on all your borders, and you are gonna have this beautiful Threadology quilt. So have fun putting all of your blocks together, then just follow your free pattern for how to add all of your borders. Thank you so much for sewing along with us and donating to Make-A-Wish. Make sure to check out our other video on tips on how to put the backing together, and check us out in 2020 for our next charity quilt.